Our next speaker is Frank van Lerven from Positive Money. He's a leading researcher for that institution and has recently presented a monetary financing proposal at the European Parliament. Indeed, he specialises in issues related to quantitative easing and state-led money creation. Having formerly worked for UNDP's Regional Service Centre in South Africa and with a background in development economics, Frank is especially interested in the influence of Western financial system on African development trajectories. Please welcome Frank van Lerven.
Hi, my name's Frank. I work for Positive Money. I do research. Thanks for having me. Just so you know, I actually heard about Positive Money through the Zeitgeist Movement. My girlfriend, my wife now, went to SOAS. We both went to SOAS. And she got put onto the Zeitgeist kind of through that, and she showed it to me. And I found a link to Positive Money when I was working at the UNDP through that. So that's kind of how I ended up with Positive Money. I'm just really happy to be here. I'm going to talk to you about money. Now, before I do that, I just really want to make sure that everybody remembers Sokotoa from school. Do you? Do we remember studying this? Who studied this at school? Yeah? For how long? Maybe 2-3 years? Is that fair enough? Yeah? Do you remember studying that at school? How many years? What did you learn about this? I'll tell you what I learned about this. I learned, 1, that governments control money, and 2, when governments make money, create money, we have inflation. Those are the 2 things that I learned. I was talking a bit about this with Barb before, and sometimes you never really ask yourself, where does money really come from, and so forth, and I'm going to talk to you about this today, and I'm going to talk to you, about the broader implications it means for society, about where money comes from, and essentially, money equals power, and we want to know who has the power to create money, yeah, and is there a so-called money tree? Yeah, hopefully by the end of the presentation we'll get to the answer. Now, just to start off with, do we know who creates these? Yeah, the coins. Let's start with coins. Who creates coins? Some people are kind of ahead. It's the Royal Mint, by the way. Coins is made by the Royal Mint. Notes, the Bank of England, yeah? What happens if we try and make them ourselves? That's right. We'll quickly be sent to prison. But what about these? What about the balance in your bank account? The electronic numbers that appear when you go and check your balance? Essentially, it's really, as James explained earlier, it's banks. Banks create the majority of our money. Lloyds, Santander, RBS, Barclays, HSBC, Halifax. Sometimes people, as has been discussed already today, we've got quite an enlightened crowd today, but some people are really like, no, I don't believe that, show me the proof. The best proof I can actually give to you is that the Bank of England came out with a report, 2014, a lot of the result of the Positive Money's kind of campaigning and lobbying, and they said, commercial high street banks create money in the form of bank deposits by making new loans. When a bank makes a loan, for example, to someone taking out a mortgage to buy a house, it does not typically do so by giving them thousands of pounds worth of banknotes. Instead, it credits their bank account with a bank deposit for the size of the mortgage. At that moment, new money is created. Yeah? Let me just give you a very quick example. A while back, I was late on my rent. I had to go onto my internet banking, click for a quick overdraft. Yeah, got a £500 overdraft, clicked on it, 3 seconds, not even, a second. And at that moment, £500 I had access to £500. So at that moment, £500 was created, yeah? So I had purchasing power. I could go and pay my rent now. Now, Lloyds, my bank, did not call up the Bank of England and say, hello, excuse me, I have enough gold in my bank account to give Frank this loan? Yeah, it doesn't happen that way. Essentially, some kind of internet system worked out, and in about half a second, it decided that they could lend me money. Yeah? So at that moment, the loan, the overdraft, new money was created. But what happens when loans are repaid? Yeah? Just as taking out a new money, this Bank of England again, just as taking out a new loan creates money, the repayment of bank loans destroys money. Banks making loans and consumers repaying them are the most significant ways in which bank deposits are created and destroyed in the modern economy. So as I go and pay down my loan, yeah, that money is then destroyed. Okay? So who creates our money? 97% of the money supply, the money stock, is created by banks. And only 3% exists in the forms of notes and coins created by the state. How much money have banks created? You know, when I tell people like, oh yeah, banks create money, the first thing they say, no, that would lead to inflation. Let me just explain this to you. Basically, every 7 to 10 years, banks have doubled our money supply. So I'm sorry, I'm going to just move from the camera here. From 2000 to 2007, yeah, the banks doubled our money supply from about 800 billion, yeah, to 1.6, almost 2 trillion in the space of 7 to 10 years. Just so you know. OMG, banks create money. Technical jargon alert, economics, it's going to go over my head. Look, something I really want people to understand is not just don't take my word for it. I'm a systems kind of person. I like understanding things. I'd like, maybe you might not grasp it all. Ooh, this is all going wrong. You might not grasp it, yeah, but at least I can give you a bit of an inkling. You'll go home and maybe you'll have a bit more interest to kind of understand it more. Yeah, but it's really important that we start to understand the systems. So to do that, I want to get into what is money. Yeah, you have notes and coins. Yeah, just as I explained. But there's also central bank reserves. Central bank reserves, they're an electronic money. Yeah, and essentially, central banks or reserves are what banks use to make payments amongst themselves. Yeah, and so at the top of this little pyramid, you've got notes and coins and central bank reserves. The next layer of money, this is commercial bank deposits. And what are commercial bank deposits, you might be asking yourselves? Well, deposit money, the money that banks create, are promises to pay notes and coins or a promise to settle a payment on your behalf. Yeah? So, two things, two great examples I can give you. It's essentially a promise, your deposits at your bank is a promise so that when you go to a cash machine, you can withdraw money. You can take out money. That's what I mean by notes and coins, yeah? Or there's a second option, which is when you use your bank card to buy coffee, yeah, then your bank has essentially paid that for you. So the deposit money in your bank account is a promise to either pay you money or to settle a payment on your behalf. And that's what deposits are. Yeah? So 97% of our money exists like this, and it is a promise to pay or settle the other 3%. Yeah? So what that means, fundamentally, is if we all decided to go and withdraw our money at the same time in the form of cash, there would be a crisis straight away. Gordon Brown, 2010, said, we're in trouble because this kind of stuff was going on. People were going to go to the banks and take out their money. We would have had, I think he said something like the military would have had to go on the street and go to cash machines. So we can't all withdraw our money at the same time. It also means, though, if we all decide to live within our means, like David Cameron wants us to do, and we all go and pay down our loans, there won't be any money left. Yeah? So if we actually start doing this living within our means, just like I explained, you pay down your loans, money is destroyed, and there is no money in the economy, and we have a crisis. So, why is it that there is so little central bank money, this 3%, yeah? This is a bit complicated, but I just want to kind of give you a bit of an idea. Just imagine for a second that there's two banks, yeah? Barclays and Lloyds, yeah? The main thing that banks do is they lend money for mortgages. So I'm just going to give a few examples here. Let's say Barclays makes 3 loans in a day for mortgages to Sally and John, to Rob and Charles, and to Leonard. Yeah, for 340k, 430k, 550K. Yeah? Let's say Lloyd's at the same time creates 550K for Gemma and Sarah, 425K for Marie, and 335K for Jack and Neil. Yeah? So at the end of the day, Barclays will have created 1,320 or K, or 1,003,020 pounds. Yeah? Lloyd's would have created 1,315K, or 1,000 pounds. Yeah? So together, these two banks in this hypothetical example have actually created 2.6 million at the end of the day. Yeah? And let's just pretend that Leonard, Sally, are buying these houses off of people that have a bank account with Lloyd's. And let's pretend that Gemma, Sarah, Marie, and Jack and Neil are buying houses off of people that have a bank account with Barclays. Yeah? So that would mean that Barclays and Lloyd's will have to settle their payments to each other. Barclays would owe Lloyd's 1,320K at the end of the day, and Lloyd's would owe Barclays 1,315K. So those, at the end of the day, banks will clear their payments that they owe to each other. Yeah? And what do you see? The clearing, the amount of money that Lloyd's, the central bank reserves that Lloyd's needs, is only 5K. Yeah? So you could actually add a zero onto all of those, and at the end of the day, Lloyd's would still only need to pay them 5K. So in this way, banks can keep on inflating the money, and they only actually need a small amount of reserves at the end of the day to pay each other. Yeah? That's how this system works. And why it works like that is because, let me just be very clear also, I wanted to get this out. What that would mean is if Lloyd's didn't even have those central bank reserves, by definition, mathematically, it could say to Barclays, hey, Barclays, is it okay if I pay you the 5K tomorrow? Yeah? Or it can actually go to Lloyd, it can go to the Bank of England and say, I'm short money, can I borrow some money from you? Yeah? So even if it didn't have those 5K in reserves, it could keep on, it could borrow them from somebody else. So basically, it could have just made all of these loans and then find somebody else to borrow the money from. And the reason why this is because you have a closed loop. There's only 46 banks in the banking system today. That means, this is guaranteed, that at the end of the day, mathematical certainty, one bank is going to have a surplus of reserves, yeah? And another bank is going to have a deficit. The deficit bank, the one that's short of reserves, can go to the one that has the excess reserves and say, hey, can I borrow some reserves from you? And just like I said, or it can go to the Bank of England and say, hey, I don't have enough money, nobody wants to lend me money, can I borrow from you? And that's how it works, yeah? This is why banks only have to have a very small amount of reserves. 17 billion worth of reserves in 2007 for Barclays, 700 billion worth of deposits. Yeah? That's not even, that's almost 2%, something like that. So, hopefully now, you might not have grasped that all, but I really hope that maybe that kind of tingled a bit of interest. You can go to the Positive Money website. We've got some videos that do a much better job of explaining this than I have just now. So what are the consequences of the power to create money? I wanted to start today in kind of the spirit of Zeitgeist. This is a statement by Mayor Amstel Rothschild. Give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws. Banks create our money. It's our currency, though, and the value of our currency is essentially backed by the people and what we do, our labor. That is what gives the currency its value. But it is banks that get to decide who creates it. So, what are the consequences? Do banks create money for themselves or for society? I just want to kind of go through where banks lend to. 51% of bank lending goes to property. Another 31% goes to the financial sector, essentially for speculation. Yeah? So that means that 80% of new money goes into these sectors. Now, the thing about property is yeah, that the majority of property is pre-existing. It already exists, so nothing new is being produced when you lend for property, yeah? And on the other side of the financial sector, it's also the same thing. Most financial assets in the financial sectors are pre-existing. So you're creating new money for things that already exist, instead of creating new money for new things, yeah? And this is where new things happen, in the business sector, yeah? And only 8% of new money or lending goes to businesses. And I'll just explain it more about why that's an issue. But let me just be clear that 80% of our new money, or how it's created, goes into things that essentially already exist. And just so you know, our incomes, people's wages are based on new things kind of being produced in our current system. Yeah? Hopefully that won't keep on going, last forever. Now, here's a very important thing. According to the Department of Business, Skills and Innovation, in 2014 there were 5.25 million SMEs in the UK, making up 99.9% of all businesses. Yeah? SMEs account for about 60% of all jobs and about 50% of GDP. Anybody want to venture a guess as to how much bank lending goes to small and medium businesses? About 25 to 30%. So of that 8% figure that I gave you there, 2% goes to small and medium businesses. 2% of new money goes into something that gives 50% of our GDP, 60% of our jobs, and 99.9% of businesses. So, the consequences. I want to get into house prices. And it was really interesting, the idea of the scarcity, this post-scarcity idea, and where money and this ability to create, sorry, I put in elastic supply, it's supposed to be elastic, but if you have an infinite amount of money, or the ability to create an infinite amount of money, and you've got scarce resources, or this idea that we have scarce resources, you know, finite amount of land, then basically you're going to have inflation, because you've got so much money, infinite amounts of money, chasing a small amount of goods. Yeah? And when you've got bigger amounts of money chasing small amounts of good, then people will raise prices. A lot of times you're told, I think, yeah, that we don't have enough housing, and that's the issue. We need to build more houses, and that's why house prices are so high. That is true. We definitely need to build more houses in this country. I'm never going to say we don't need to. But we also need to look at bank lending, and how bank lending influences the demographics and the issues of house prices. Yeah? So, just to give you an idea, this is the housing stock down there. Yeah? Population growth. Housing stock up to 2007 grew faster than population. We were building more houses than there was people. Yeah? So how is it that house prices increase then? Well, look at mortgage lending. Top one, house prices. You can see, okay, correlation doesn't prove causation, but you can see that there's a much better correlation between mortgage lending and house prices. And let me just give you a bit of an idea about how this works. Imagine you're at an auction, yeah, and you're just there, and you're one person with the auctioneer, yeah, and you want to buy a house. The auctioneer will not set a high price because he knows there's only one person there, yeah. But if there's 5 people, yeah, and there's an auctioneer, then the auctioneer will be able to raise the price, and you've got other people there bidding, so eventually the house price will increase, yeah? That's just basic, obvious economics for auctioning. But imagine now you have a bank just outside or in the room with the auctioneer who can create as much money as those 5 people need. And what's going to happen then to the dynamics of the price kind of bidding that's going on? And that's what we have in London right now. You've got all these banks that can create as much money as they need or as people want, and you've got hundreds of people kind of bidding and fighting over property. And that's what's driving prices up. So, I just want to get into the financial crisis and how it's caused. Firstly, the creation of money by banks pushes up house prices. Yeah? If house prices are higher, then people have to borrow more relative to their income. So household debt rises. Yeah. In addition, bank lending for credit cards and overdrafts means that people can borrow more. So that also pushes up household debt. Yeah. As people borrow more, house prices increase. I can't afford a house, but other people on higher wages can. You get inequality. Yeah. Now, inequality, high levels of debt, especially in America, a big thing that happened there. As you get more debt, more inequality, you get a financial crisis. Yeah. The financial crisis of 2007-2008 occurred because we failed to constrain the private bank's financial system, creation of private credit and money. This is the former chairman of the Financial Services Authority, Lord Adair Turner. A very good academic study by Jordy Schulrich and Taylor. Credit debt growth is a powerful predictor of financial crises, suggesting that such crises are credit booms gone wrong, and that policymakers ignore credit at their peril. Yeah. Financial crises, then, as soon as you kind of have this massive crisis where people, they run to the banks in exchange for their deposits, they want cash, you eventually get a recession. What happens in a recession? Yeah, because so much private debt is in existence, we, the private sector, households and businesses, we don't want more loans. We want to start paying down our loans, yeah, so we can get out of debt. At the same time, banks made some really stupid loans, and they're worried about the risk on their balance sheets, and they've made, so they stop lending. They're worried. And a lot of times there's new regulations coming in, so they have to stop lending, yeah, because of these kind of increased regulations and requirements. And eventually, the government initially, yeah, will respond and increase public spending for social expenditures like unemployment benefits. But at the same time, because there's massive unemployment, yeah, after the financial crisis and the recession, because people aren't spending, the government's income tax will decline. So you've got a massive revenue of the government declining, but their deficit, but their expenditure increases, and you get a massive budget deficit. And so after about 2 years, the government goes into austerity mode. And this is what you have in Europe right now. It's a massive problem. Nobody is spending. And if you have no spending, you have no income. And then you get a recession. And that's what's happening in the Eurozone. It happened in 2010, 2011 here in the UK. So, financial crises, you get recession. Recession, just as I explained, leads to unemployment because people aren't spending, you get no income. Unemployment leads to inequality. Government finances, you kind of get worried about them. Austerity. Austerity leads to more unemployment. And then eventually, the government will be like, hey, you know what, we promised you to be the greenest government in the whole entire world. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore because we don't have enough money. Yeah? This is Robert H. Hemphill from the Atlanta Federal Reserve. I came across this the other day. If all bank loans were repaid and no one could have a bank deposit, there would not be a dollar left in circulation. We are completely dependent on the commercial banks. Someone has to borrow money to have a dollar in circulation, cash or credit. If the banks create ample synthetic money, we are prosperous. If they don't, we starve. That is how dependent we are on the banks. Mervyn King is famous for saying, and he's our former governor of the Bank of England, of all the many ways of organizing banking, the worst is the one we have today. What should we do? So talking about this, we think that the ability of private banks to create money is a driver, if not the root of a lot of the current problems. So we need to think about how money is created and change it. We want to basically return the power to create money to the state, to a transparent, democratic, accountable body that creates money in the public interest. Now, we know that banks can't be trusted to create money either, but we can't trust politicians because they would just create too much money to win the election, right? So there needs to basically be a very good institutional kind of divide. How much money to create would be decided independently by the Bank of England. The government then can kind of, just like what they do with normal budget kind of allocation, they get to decide what it would be for. You would create money without private or public sector going into debt. So currently, if we want to increase spending in the economy, we need people to go into debt. Yeah? With this idea, the government would spend money. It could create its own money and get spending in the economy going without anybody having to go into debt. And that's what's the problem in Southern Europe, and it was our problem in 2010 and 2011, is that the only way to get spending going was to get people into debt, and nobody wants to be in debt when you're in a recession. So this is a way you can kind of get spending going without getting people into debt. Banks would also work like they should, or how we think they should. You'd have a saver, they deposit their money at the bank, yeah, and then a borrower would go to the bank and take out those savings, and that's how loans would work. So you'd still have banks. Banks are important. They are. They might be a bit greedy, and the incentive structure might be wrong currently. But we do, currently in our system, we do need banks. Money would be created for the real economy rather than just for houses or for financial speculation. Yeah? So we kind of propose two different things. It could either be used for public investment, you know, green infrastructure projects, etc., or you could just create a bunch of money and kind of deliver it in a check to everybody in the post at the end of the day. Yeah? So you might think this is a very radical idea. We've got a whole bunch of people who are on board right now. Martin Wolf, for example, of the Financial Times. Sir Mervyn King, is, you know, the former Bank of England governor, has also proposed similar ideas. Chief economists at the IMF, at the Bank of England, are endorsing our kinds of ideas. So it's not that radical, actually, anymore. In Switzerland, they've generated a referendum, got 112,000 signatures. They're going to have a debate on this. Same in the Netherlands. Iceland's put forward a whole proposition that's being thought about in Parliament, and they're going to debate it. We've also got over 30 different local groups throughout the country. We've organized a debate about money creation in society in November of 2014. Just for your information, we took a poll. 1 out of 10 politicians know how money is created. At least it's not 1 out of 20, I guess. We've had a petition. We're trying to get this Treasury Select Committee about money, you know, for a money commission. We've started a QE for People campaign, or, you know, a public money creation campaign for Eurozone. No more, just go to our website. Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question? So, you know, you mentioned that only 8% of the money comes from goes to companies who are creating things.
Yeah.
Innovation doesn't always work; it fails. So, if you have people who have savers lending to those people, how do they guarantee that they don't lose their money? We are essentially taking the risk for the innovation. I'm just asking, is that how it works?
Yeah, sure, but don't you think, I mean, investments need risk. That is, the thing about the banking system is it's special because they get to make investments, they get to take risks, and they're bailed out by the taxpayers. Any other business, yeah, that does investments and has risks, yeah, they don't get bailed out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I'm just clarifying that point. I mean, yeah. But it does transfer risk to the population for innovation and for progress, essentially.
Well, in some ways, yes. But I would actually probably say, because the state would have this money creation possibility at their hands, I think R&D, research and development, in most countries is about 2%, if I'm correct. There's probably people who know more about this here than I do. But one that you could use this money, the state's ability to create money, for R&D, and increase that to 4%, which would be massive, even though it's a small figure. You know, and you'd still, the state could still subsidize if it wanted to, and you know, there's definitely other ways of getting around risk.
Can we have one more question, please?
Can I also just say that I might not be here for the panel time, but you can get me during the break time at lunch if you have some questions, or the website.
Yeah. Obviously, you've got the big question about creation of money, but you know the big thing that people don't understand is that mortgages, the old creation of the mortgage is who owns the property. So now for a day you own that property, so all mortgages are fraudulent, by the way, in 1989, you know that. And that's the big thing in the legal system now. We're proving that actually the banks didn't give you anything, your signature created it, and there's a lot of cases going through now to prove. I'm attending one in Birmingham at the moment.
Oh, cool.
Right, so it's mortgages are fraudulent because the house is owned by you initially. You signed for the money because the banks don't give them. There's no equal consideration. So that's not often said, and that's a big dynamic going on in the legal world at the moment.
Great. Is there a question?
Well,
no, sorry, from somebody else maybe.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, but not maybe the specialty here. I think yeah, let's take another very quick question, please.
That's an interesting one, because it's the environmental. There's definitely a big movement for this, because you can stop getting banks from creating too much money for environmentally damaging things, and there's a danger that if we kind of pursue growth and the objectives of the banking sector, that it's all going to go to unenvironmentally friendly things. From the business side of things, it's a bit of an interesting one, because they don't understand these kind of concepts, and they're already worried that banks don't lend them enough money, and they think that under our system, and it's really annoying, and my job is kind of clarifying these ideas, and they think that maybe there wouldn't be enough money for them because banks would be limited to people's savings, but that's completely erroneous, and I've written a paper on it, if anybody's interested.
Could everyone give Frank a round of applause?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.